I never thought I would become the kind of person who checks the locks 3 times before going to sleep. I never imagined I would learn to recognize the sound of someone's footsteps and feel my heart rate spike with fear rather than comfort. I never believed that the person I trusted most in the world, the person I called my best friend, the woman who held my hand through breakups and job losses and the death of my father, would become the very monster I needed to escape from. But that is exactly what happened. My name is Sophie, and this is the story of how my roommate turned into my enemy. It is the story of how I was deceived, manipulated, and nearly destroyed by someone I loved like a sister. And it is the story of how I fought back, not with anger or violence, but with patience, intelligence, and the kind of cold, calculated determination that only emerges when you have lost everything and have nothing left to fear. I want you to understand something before I begin. I am not a vengeful person by nature. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by parents who believed in honesty, hard work, and treating people the way you want to be treated. My mother was a nurse who worked double shifts to make sure my brother and I never went without. My father was a factory worker who died of a heart attack when I was 22, leaving behind a legacy of kindness and a small life insurance policy that allowed me to finish college without drowning in debt. I was taught that good things come to those who work hard and stay humble. I believed that if you are loyal to people, they will be loyal to you. I believed that friendship was sacred, that trust was earned through years of shared experience, and that when you find someone who truly understands you, you hold on to them with everything you have. Megan Cross was that person for me, or at least I thought she was. We met during our freshman year at Ohio State University. It was orientation week, and I was sitting alone in the dining hall, overwhelmed by the size of the campus and the realization that I knew absolutely no one. I had grown up in a town where everyone knew everyone, where I could walk into any store and be greeted by name. Now I was surrounded by thousands of strangers, and the loneliness felt like a physical weight on my chest. That was when Megan appeared. She slid into the seat across from me with a tray of food and a smile that could light up a stadium. She had honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, bright blue eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief, and an easy confidence that I immediately envied. "You look like you need a friend," she said, and just like that, she inserted herself into my life. Looking back now, I can see that there were signs from the very beginning. Small things that I dismissed as quirks or overlooked because of how desperately I wanted to believe in our friendship. The way she always had to be the center of attention. The way she would compliment me and then add a subtle dig that left me feeling smaller. The way she collected people like trophies and discarded them when they were no longer useful. But I did not see any of that then. All I saw was a beautiful, charismatic girl who had chosen me, plain and ordinary Sophie Hartwell from nowhere, Ohio, to be her best friend. I was flattered. I was grateful. I was completely and utterly fooled. For the next 8 years, Megan and I were inseparable. We studied together, partied together, cried together. She was the maid of honor at my brother's wedding. She held my hand at my father's funeral. She was there when I got my first real job at a marketing firm in Columbus, and she was there when I decided to take a leap of faith and move to Chicago for a better opportunity. In fact, it was her idea. "Come on, Soph," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "Chicago is where it's happening. I just got offered a position at a PR firm downtown, and they're paying me more money than I've ever seen in my life. You can transfer to your company's Chicago office. We can get an apartment together. It'll be like college all over again, except this time we'll actually have money." I was hesitant at first. Chicago was a big city, much bigger than Columbus, and I had just started to feel settled in my life. But Megan was persuasive in that way she always was, making the adventure sound irresistible while simultaneously making me feel like I would be missing out on something incredible if I said no. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. I always said yes to Megan. We found an apartment in Lincoln Park, a beautiful 2-bedroom with hardwood floors and exposed brick, and a view of the city skyline that took my breath away every morning. The rent was expensive, much more than I was comfortable with, but Megan assured me that we would split everything 50-50 and that our combined income would make it completely manageable. For the first 6 months, everything was perfect. We fell into an easy routine of morning coffee and evening wine, of shared meals and Netflix binges and lazy Sunday brunches at the cafe down the street. I started to believe that I had finally found my place in the world, that I had built a life that was everything I had ever dreamed of. I had a job I loved, working as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized company that specialized in sustainable products. I had a beautiful apartment in a beautiful city, and I had my best friend right there with me, sharing in all of it. I should have known it was too good to be true. The first crack in the foundation appeared about 7 months after we moved in together. It was small, so small that I almost did not notice it, but looking back, I can see that it was the moment when everything started to shift. I had just received a promotion at work. It was not a huge jump, just a bump in title from marketing coordinator to marketing manager, but it came with a significant raise and a corner office with a window. I was thrilled. I had worked so hard for this, staying late and coming in early and taking on projects that no one else wanted. Finally, my efforts were being recognized. I rushed home that evening, bursting with excitement to share the news with Megan. I found her in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, and I practically tackled her in my enthusiasm. "Megan, you are not going to believe this," I said, my words tumbling over each other. "I got the promotion. I'm the new marketing manager. They're giving me a raise and a corner office and my own team to manage. Can you believe it?" I expected her to scream with joy, to pull me into a hug, to insist that we go out and celebrate immediately. That was what Megan always did when good things happened. She was the queen of celebrations, the one who turned every small victory into a reason for champagne and confetti. But instead, something strange flickered across her face. It was there and gone in an instant, so quick that I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. A tightening around her eyes, a slight downturn of her lips, a flash of something dark and unpleasant that I had never seen before. Then she smiled, and it was the same dazzling Megan smile that I had known for years. "That's amazing, Soph," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt just slightly too brief. "I'm so happy for you. We should definitely celebrate." But she did not suggest champagne. She did not insist on going out. She just poured me a glass of wine and changed the subject to a problem she was having at work, some drama with a colleague who did not appreciate her genius. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that Megan was probably just tired or stressed or preoccupied with her own issues. I pushed the memory of that strange expression to the back of my mind and focused on enjoying my success. But over the next few weeks, I started to notice other things. Small things, like how Megan would change the subject whenever I talked about work, or how she would make little comments about my job, nothing overtly negative, but subtly dismissive. "Must be nice to work for a company that actually values its employees," she would say with a sigh. Or, "I guess some people just get lucky." I started to feel guilty about my promotion, as if I had done something wrong by succeeding. I found myself downplaying my achievements when Megan was around, not mentioning the positive feedback from my boss or the exciting projects I was working on. I did not want to make her feel bad. That was my first mistake. I was so busy protecting Megan's feelings that I did not stop to question why my success seemed to bother her so much. The second crack came about 2 months later, and this one was harder to ignore. I had been dating casually since moving to Chicago, nothing serious, just a few first dates here and there that never went anywhere. But then I met Ryan Mitchell at a networking event, and everything changed. Ryan was exactly the kind of man I had always dreamed about. He was tall and dark-haired, with the kind of jawline that belonged on a magazine cover. He worked in finance, something with investments that I did not fully understand, but that clearly paid well, given the tailored suits and expensive watch. He was charming and funny and attentive, and when he asked for my number at the end of the evening, I felt like I was floating on air. Our first date was at a fancy Italian restaurant downtown, The kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who called you ma'am. Ryan ordered wine without looking at the prices and asked me questions about my life as if he genuinely wanted to know the answers. By the end of the evening, I was completely smitten. I told Megan about him the next morning, unable to contain my excitement. "His name is Ryan, and he's perfect," I gushed, showing her his picture on my phone. "We talked for 3 hours, and it felt like 3 minutes. He wants to see me again this weekend." Megan studied the picture for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "He's cute," she said finally, handing the phone back to me. "Where did you say he works?" "Mitchell and Associates. It's some kind of investment firm." "Interesting." She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes distant. "Well, I hope he's as great as he seems. You know how men can be, all charm and no substance." I brushed off the comment, attributing it to Megan's recent string of bad dates. She had been complaining for weeks about how impossible it was to find a decent man in Chicago, how all the good ones were either taken or secretly terrible. I assumed she was just being protective, warning me not to get my hopes up too high. Ryan and I went on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks, each one better than the last. He took me to concerts and art galleries and rooftop bars with views of the entire city. He texted me good morning and called me just to hear my voice. He made me feel special in a way I had never felt before. I was falling for him, hard and fast and completely. And then, about a month into our relationship, I came home early from work to find Megan and Ryan sitting together on our couch, deep in conversation. I stood in the doorway, my keys still in my hand, trying to process what I was seeing. They were sitting close, closer than necessary, and Megan had her hand on his arm in a way that seemed far too familiar. When they noticed me, they both jumped slightly, guilty expressions flashing across their faces before being quickly replaced by forced smiles. "Sophie," Ryan said, standing up and crossing the room to kiss my cheek. "You're home early." "The meeting got canceled," I said, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Megan said quickly, too quickly. "Ryan stopped by to surprise you, and I was just keeping him company until you got here. We were talking about that new restaurant that opened on Michigan Avenue. I was telling him you would love it." It sounded reasonable. It was a perfectly logical explanation, but something about the way they had been sitting together, the way they had both reacted when I walked in, set off alarm bells in my head that I could not silence. I pushed the feeling down, told myself I was being ridiculous. Megan was my best friend. Ryan was crazy about me. There was no way either of them would betray me like that. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it refused to stop growing. Over the next few weeks, I found myself watching them more carefully. I noticed the way Megan always seemed to be around when Ryan came over, how she would find excuses to join us for dinner or drinks. I noticed the way she would laugh at his jokes, touch his arm, lean in close when she talked to him. I noticed, too, the way Ryan's eyes would sometimes linger on her a beat too long, the way he seemed distracted when she was in the room, the way he had started comparing us in subtle ways. "Megan really knows her wines," he would say after she had spent 20 minutes lecturing us on the difference between Pinot Noir and Cabernet. Or, "Megan has such a great sense of style," when she emerged from her room in some designer dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I tried to talk to Megan about it, tried to express my concerns without sounding accusatory. "Do you think Ryan is really into me?" I asked her one night when we were alone. "Sometimes I feel like he's more interested in you than in me." Megan laughed, a bright, dismissive sound that made me feel foolish for even asking. "Don't be ridiculous, Soph. Ryan is obsessed with you. He barely notices me. I'm just being friendly because he's your boyfriend. That's what friends do." I wanted to believe her. I wanted so badly to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The truth came crashing down on me 3 months later, on a night that I will never forget as long as I live. Ryan and I had been dating for 4 months at that point, and things had become strained. He was working long hours, or so he claimed, and our dates had become less frequent. When we were together, he seemed distant, distracted, always checking his phone. I had convinced myself that it was just the pressure of his job, that once things calmed down, he would be back to his usual attentive self. That night, I had planned a surprise for him. I knew he had a big presentation the next day, and I thought I would bring him dinner at his office, a romantic gesture to show him that I was thinking of him. I picked up his favorite takeout, a bottle of wine, and drove downtown, already imagining the look of delight on his face when I walked through the door. But when I arrived at his office building, the security guard told me that Ryan had left hours ago. He said something about dinner plans, the guard offered, clearly not understanding why this information made all the color drain from my face. I sat in my car for a long time, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he had gone to pick up the dinner himself. Maybe he had errands to run. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation. But deep down, I already knew. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Our apartment building came into view, and I saw Ryan's car parked on the street outside. He was there. He was at our apartment. But I had not told him I would be gone. I parked around the corner and sat there for a moment, trying to gather the courage to face what I already suspected. Part of me wanted to just drive away, to pretend I had never come home early, to continue living in blissful ignorance. But I knew that was not an option. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I entered the building as quietly as I could, taking the stairs instead of the elevator to avoid making noise. When I reached our floor, I walked slowly down the hallway, my heart pounding so loud I was sure they would hear it. The door to our apartment was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, and the world as I knew it shattered into a million pieces. They were on the couch, exactly where I had found them months ago. But this time, there was no pretending, no innocent explanation. Ryan and Megan were wrapped around each other, kissing with the kind of passionate abandon that told me this was not the first time. This was not even the 20th time. This was a relationship, a real relationship, happening right under my nose in my own home. I must have made some kind of sound, a gasp or a sob or something, because they suddenly pulled apart and turned to look at me. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. We just stood there, frozen in a tableau of betrayal. And then Megan smiled. It was not a guilty smile, not the horrified expression of someone caught doing something terrible. It was a slow, satisfied smile, the smile of a cat that has finally caught the mouse. She looked at me with something like triumph in her eyes, and I realized with sickening clarity that this was not an accident. This was not a moment of weakness or a mistake fueled by alcohol. This was intentional. This was calculated. This was exactly what she had wanted all along. "Sophie," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." But she was not sorry. She was not sorry at all. Ryan, at least, had the decency to look ashamed. He stood up, running a hand through his disheveled hair, his eyes darting between me and Megan as if trying to decide whose side to take. "Sophie, I can explain," he started, but I held up my hand to stop him. "Don't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Just don't." I turned and walked out of the apartment, down the stairs, and out into the cold Chicago night. I walked for hours, not knowing where I was going, not caring. The tears came eventually, hot and bitter, streaming down my face as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. My best friend had stolen my boyfriend. No, that was not quite right. My best friend had deliberately set out to take the man I loved, not because she wanted him, but because I had him. She had watched me fall in love, encouraged me to open my heart, and then systematically destroyed everything. But why? What had I ever done to deserve this? I ended up at a bar somewhere on the north side, a dive with sticky floors and a bartender who did not ask questions. I ordered drink after drink, trying to drown the pain, trying to make sense of a world that had suddenly turned upside down. It was after midnight when my phone started buzzing. Text after text from Megan, each one more infuriating than the last. "Sophie, please come home. We need to talk." I never meant for this to happen. It just did. Ryan and I have a real connection. You have to understand. Don't be dramatic. This is just a bump in the road. I stared at the messages, my vision blurring with a combination of tears and alcohol. A real connection. Just a bump in the road. She was talking about the destruction of my entire life as if it were a minor inconvenience. I turned off my phone and ordered another drink. I spent that night at a cheap hotel near the airport, staring at the stained ceiling and trying to figure out what to do next. I could not go back to the apartment. Not now, possibly not ever. The thought of seeing Megan's face, of smelling Ryan's cologne on the couch cushions, made me physically ill. But I also could not just disappear. My life was in that apartment, my clothes, my books, the photo albums full of memories. My entire existence was entangled with Megan's, and extracting myself was going to be far more complicated than simply walking away. In the early hours of the morning, when the sky was just starting to lighten, I made a decision. I was not going to let this destroy me. I was not going to slink away in shame and let Megan win. I was going to pick myself up, dust myself off, and figure out how to move forward. But I was also going to find out the truth. I needed to understand why this had happened, what I had missed, how I had been so completely fooled by someone I thought I knew better than anyone. I did not realize it then, but that decision, that need to understand, would lead me down a path I never could have imagined. A path that would reveal secrets far darker than a stolen boyfriend, lies that stretched back years, and a betrayal so deep and so calculated that it would take my breath away, and it would lead me, ultimately, to revenge. When I returned to the apartment the next day, Megan was gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter, written in her looping handwriting. "Staying with Ryan for a few days. We should talk when you're ready." Staying with Ryan. As if they were a normal couple, as if what they had done was perfectly acceptable. As if I were the unreasonable one for being upset. I spent the day packing. Not everything, just the essentials. My clothes, my toiletries, my laptop, the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. I worked methodically, refusing to let myself feel anything, pushing all the emotions down into a tight ball in my chest that I would deal with later. I found a short-term rental on the other side of the city, a small studio that was overpriced and underfinished, but was mine and mine alone. I moved in that evening, sitting on the bare mattress and staring at the blank walls and wondering how my life had gone so wrong so quickly. The next few weeks were a blur of pain and confusion and rage. I went through the motions at work, smiling when I needed to smile and nodding when I needed to nod, but inside I was hollow. Every night, I came home to my empty studio and replayed the events over and over, trying to find the moment when everything had changed, trying to understand how I had missed the signs. I ignored Megan's calls and texts, deleted her emails without reading them. I had nothing to say to her, and I was not interested in anything she had to say to me. Our friendship was over, destroyed beyond any hope of repair. But as the weeks passed and the initial shock began to fade, something else started to emerge. A cold, calculating anger that settled into my bones and refused to leave. I was not just hurt anymore. I was furious. How dare she? How dare she take everything from me and then act as if I were the one being unreasonable? How dare she spend years pretending to be my friend, knowing all along that she was waiting for the perfect moment to destroy me? Because I had started to realize that was exactly what had happened. This was not a sudden betrayal, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. This was a long game, a careful and deliberate plan that Megan had been executing for years. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking for it. The way she had always subtly undermined my confidence, making little comments that made me doubt myself. The way she had inserted herself into every aspect of my life, making sure that she was involved in every decision, every relationship, every opportunity. The way she had encouraged me to move to Chicago in the first place, presenting it as an adventure when really it was just another way to keep me close, to keep me under her control. And the more I thought about it, the more patterns I saw. Every boyfriend I had ever had, Megan had been there, hovering at the edges, planting seeds of doubt. "Are you sure he's right for you?" she would ask. "I just want you to be happy, but I'm not sure he appreciates you the way he should." The relationships would inevitably end, and Megan would be there to pick up the pieces, consoling me and reinforcing her position as the only person I could truly rely on. Every job opportunity, every potential friendship, every chance for me to grow and change and become my own person, Megan had been there, subtly steering me away from anything that might threaten her control. She had kept me small, kept me dependent, kept me exactly where she wanted me. And I had let her. That was the hardest part to accept. I had let her do this to me because I trusted her, because I loved her, because I could not imagine that anyone, especially my best friend, could be so deliberately cruel. But now my eyes were open, and I could see her clearly for the first time. It was about a month after the breakup when I received an unexpected phone call. I was at work, buried in a marketing campaign that was consuming all of my energy and most of my sanity, when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Sophie Hartwell?" The voice on the other end was male, professional, slightly hesitant. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Daniel Porter. I work at Grayson Financial. I'm calling about Ryan Mitchell." My blood ran cold at the sound of his name. "I don't know what you want, but I have nothing to say about Ryan." "I understand," Daniel said quickly, "and I'm sorry to bring this up, but I think you might want to hear what I have to say. It's about Megan Cross." I paused, my finger hovering over the end call button. Something in his voice made me hesitate, a note of urgency that cut through my resistance. "I'm listening," I said finally. "I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me for coffee? Somewhere public, wherever you feel comfortable. I promise I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just think you deserve to know the truth." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. We set a time and place, a busy cafe near my office, and I spent the rest of the afternoon trying not to imagine what kind of truth Daniel Porter might have to share. When I arrived at the cafe that evening, I spotted him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him, looking nervous and out of place. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and the sort of open, honest face that makes you want to trust him immediately. "Thank you for meeting me," he said as I sat down across from him. "I know this must be strange." "Strange doesn't begin to cover it," I replied. "You mentioned the truth." "What truth?" Daniel took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I work with Ryan. We're in the same department at Grayson. He talks about his personal life a lot, probably more than he should. And I've heard things, Sophie. Things that you need to know." "What kind of things?" "The relationship between Ryan and Megan. It didn't start when you think it did. They've been together for a long time, almost a year, maybe longer." The words hit me like a physical blow. A year? That was impossible. I had been dating Ryan for 4 months. If they had been together for a year, that meant they were together before he even met you, Daniel continued, confirming my worst fears. "I think, and I'm sorry to say this, but I think you were a pawn. Some kind of game between them." "A game?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "What kind of game?" Daniel looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "I don't know all the details, but from what I've gathered, Megan and Ryan have done this before. They target someone, usually a woman that Megan is close to, and then Ryan swoops in and plays the perfect boyfriend. After a while, the relationship falls apart, and Megan is there to pick up the pieces. It's some kind of sick power play, a way for them to feel superior." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what he was telling me. It was so monstrous, so deliberately cruel, that part of me wanted to reject it outright. But another part of me, the part that had been piecing together the puzzle of Megan's betrayal for weeks, recognized the truth in his words. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "What do you get out of it?" Daniel shrugged. looking slightly embarrassed. Honestly, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. I've watched Ryan brag about this stuff at work, laughing about how easy it was to fool you, and it made me sick. You seem like a good person, Sophie. You deserve to know what you're dealing with. I thanked him mechanically, my mind already racing ahead. If what Daniel said was true, then this was not just about a stolen boyfriend. This was about a systematic pattern of manipulation and cruelty that had been going on for years. I was not Megan's first victim, and if I did not do something, I would not be her last. The question was, what could I do? Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I stayed in touch. He became an unexpected ally, someone who understood what Megan and Ryan were capable of because he had seen it firsthand. He shared what he knew, which was not much, but enough to confirm my suspicions and point me in the right direction. According to Daniel, Megan and Ryan had been together on and off for years, since before Megan and I had even moved to Chicago. Their relationship was volatile and unhealthy, built on jealousy and competition, and a shared desire to feel powerful by hurting others. They would break up, find new victims to toy with, and then reunite once the game was over, laughing about the destruction they had caused. I was just the latest in a long line of casualties, but I was determined to be the last. I started to investigate, quietly and carefully. I dug into Megan's past, reaching out to old college friends and former roommates, anyone who might have insight into who she really was. The stories I heard chilled me to the bone. There was Anna, a girl from our freshman dorm who had been Megan's best friend before I came along. She had dated a guy named Marcus, and Megan had stolen him away just like she had stolen Ryan. When Anna confronted her, Megan had spread vicious rumors, destroying Anna's reputation and forcing her to transfer to another school. There was Jessica, a co-worker from Megan's first job out of college. She had been in line for a promotion that Megan wanted, and somehow she had been fired for misconduct just days before the announcement. Later, Jessica discovered that Megan had fabricated evidence of her wrongdoing and presented it to their boss. There was Lindsay, a distant cousin who had made the mistake of getting engaged before Megan did. Megan had seduced the fiancé at the engagement party, causing a scene that destroyed the relationship and tore the family apart. The pattern was undeniable. Megan was not just petty or jealous. She was a predator, a calculated destroyer of lives who took pleasure in tearing down anyone who threatened to outshine her. And I had been living with her for years, completely oblivious to the monster sleeping in the next room. The anger that had been simmering inside me since the night of the betrayal began to crystallize into something harder and more focused. I was done being a victim. I was done letting Megan dictate the terms of my life. It was time to turn the tables, but I knew I had to be smart about it. Megan was cunning, and she had decades of experience in manipulation and deception. If I went after her directly, she would see me coming and find a way to destroy me before I could land a single blow. No, I needed to play the long game. I needed to gather evidence, build alliances, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. I needed to beat her at her own game. The first step was to move back into the apartment. I know that sounds insane, and maybe it was, but I had a plan. The lease was in both of our names, and I had every right to live there. By returning, I would have access to Megan's life in a way I never had before. I could watch her, learn her patterns, gather evidence of her schemes, and I could make her uncomfortable. She thought she had won, thought she had driven me away and claimed everything for herself. My return would shake her confidence and maybe, just maybe, cause her to make a mistake. I moved back in on a cold November day, my boxes stacked in the living room and my resolve hardened to steel. Megan was at work when I arrived, so I had time to settle in before confronting her. When she walked through the door that evening and saw me sitting on the couch, her face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Shock, confusion, anger, and then finally, that familiar mask of pleasant friendliness that I now knew hid something far more sinister. "Sophie," she said, her voice carefully neutral, I didn't expect to see you here." "It's my apartment too," I replied, keeping my own voice just as controlled. I decided I wasn't ready to give it up yet. We stood there for a moment, two predators sizing each other up, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was trying to figure out my angle, trying to understand what I was planning. "Well," she said finally, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "it'll be good to have you back. We have a lot to talk about." "I'm sure we do," I agreed, but I had no intention of talking. Not yet. Right now, I was here to watch and learn and wait. The game had begun. Living with Megan again was an exercise in psychological warfare. On the surface, everything was normal, even pleasant. We cooked dinner together, watched TV, made small talk about work and weather, and the mundane details of daily life. But underneath the facade, tension crackled like electricity before a storm. Megan was suspicious of me, I could tell. She kept watching me out of the corner of her eye, trying to catch me off guard, waiting for me to reveal my true intentions. But I gave her nothing. I was the picture of calm acceptance, the forgiving friend who just wanted to move on from an unfortunate misunderstanding. It drove her crazy. "You're being weird," she said to me one night, about a week after I had moved back in. We were in the kitchen, pretending to enjoy a glass of wine together, and her frustration was starting to show. "Weird how?" "I don't know." She waved her hand vaguely. "You're too nice, too understanding. I expected you to scream at me, throw things, make my life miserable, but instead you're acting like nothing happened." I shrugged, taking a sip of my wine. What would be the point of screaming? It wouldn't change anything. Ryan chose you, and I have to accept that. We've been friends for too long to let a man come between us. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced them out with a smile. Megan studied me for a long moment, clearly not buying it, but unable to find the flaw in my performance. "Well," she said finally, "I'm glad you're being mature about this. It's really admirable. Admirable. As if I were a child who had learned to share my toys." I wanted to scream at her, to demand to know how she could be so callous, so utterly devoid of remorse. But I swallowed my rage and smiled. "That's me," I said lightly. "Always admirable." Behind my mask of calm acceptance, I was working. Every day, I paid careful attention to Megan's habits, her routines, her connections. I noted when she came and went, who she talked to on the phone, what she did on her computer when she thought I wasn't looking. And slowly, painstakingly, I began to build a picture of her life. A picture that was far more complex and far more damaging than I ever could have imagined. The first major discovery came about 3 weeks after I moved back in. I had noticed that Megan was spending a lot of time on her laptop late at night, always with headphones in, always in her room with the door closed. One night, when she went to take a shower and left the laptop on the coffee table, I took a risk. The device was password protected, but Megan had never been very creative. I tried her birthday, her mother's maiden name, the name of her childhood pet. Nothing worked. Then, on a whim, I typed in Sophie 2016, the year we had become roommates. The laptop unlocked. I felt sick to my stomach. She had used my name as her password, as if I were just another tool in her collection. But I pushed the disgust aside and started looking through her files. What I found made my blood run cold. There was a folder on her desktop called Projects, and inside were subfolders with women's names: Anna, Jessica, Lindsay, and there, at the bottom of the list, Sophie. I clicked on my folder, my hands shaking. Inside were documents and spreadsheets and notes, all detailing a careful plan to destroy my life. There was a timeline of our friendship, with annotations about my vulnerabilities and insecurities. There were notes about Ryan, including when and how to introduce him into my life for maximum impact. There were drafts of text messages designed to gaslight me, to make me doubt my own perceptions. And there were screenshots. Hundreds of screenshots of private conversations I had had with Megan, carefully edited to make me look unstable and paranoid. There were also conversations between Megan and Ryan, in which they laughed about how easy I was to manipulate, how desperate I was for love and approval, how pathetic I was. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, trying to comprehend the depth of her hatred. This was not a crime of passion, not a moment of weakness. This was a meticulous, calculated destruction of my entire life, planned out in advance and executed with cold precision. And the worst part? According to the timeline, she had started planning it years ago. Long before Ryan, long before Chicago, she had been laying the groundwork for my downfall. Every moment of our friendship, every shared secret and late-night confession had been research for her sick game. I had never been her friend. I had only ever been her victim. I closed the laptop and returned it to its place just as the shower turned off. When Megan emerged, wrapped in a towel with her wet hair dripping onto her shoulders, I was sitting innocently on the couch, scrolling through my phone. "Everything okay?" she asked, her eyes sweeping the room for anything out of place. "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "Just tired. I think I'm going to head to bed early." "Sleep well," Megan called after me as I retreated to my room. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I had the evidence I needed. Now I just had to figure out what to do with it. Over the next few weeks, I continued my investigation while maintaining my facade of forgiveness. I took photos of Megan's laptop when she left it unattended, documenting the contents of her projects folder. I recorded conversations where she made incriminating statements, always careful to check that one-party consent was legal in Illinois. I reached out to her other victims, building a network of women who had been destroyed by her manipulations and were hungry for justice. And I discovered something else, something that changed everything. Megan was not just cruel, she was a thief. It started with a discrepancy in our rent payments. I had been transferring my share of the rent to Megan's account, as I had done for years, trusting her to pay the landlord. But when I ran into the building manager one day, he mentioned that we were 2 months behind on rent. "That's impossible," I said, confused. "I've been paying Megan every month." The manager shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you. The account is past due. If it's not paid by the end of the week, I'm going to have to start eviction proceedings." I went back to my bank records and started tracing the payments. Every month, I had transferred my share to Megan, but when I compared the amounts to what the landlord was receiving, there was a significant discrepancy. Megan had been taking my rent money and keeping a portion for herself. The realization sent me spiraling. I started looking at our other shared expenses, the utilities, the internet, the subscription services we split. Every single one showed the same pattern. Megan had been skimming off the top for years, telling me we owed more than we actually did and pocketing the difference. By my calculations, she had stolen over $15,000 from me over the course of our friendship. $15,000. That was the price of my trust, my loyalty, my years of devotion to someone who had never seen me as anything but an easy mark. The anger that had been building inside me reached a fever pitch. This was not just about Ryan anymore, not just about romantic betrayal or stolen boyfriends. This was financial exploitation, pure and simple, and in the eyes of the law, it was a crime. I started building a case. I gathered bank statements, receipts, any documentation that showed the discrepancy between what I had paid and what we actually owed. I consulted with a lawyer, quietly, about my options, and I prepared myself for the confrontation that I knew was coming. But I was not ready yet. I needed one more piece of the puzzle, one more bit of leverage that would guarantee Megan's downfall. I needed to prove that she had done this to others. Daniel was instrumental in this part of the plan. Through his connections at Ryan's firm, he was able to put me in touch with a woman named Sarah, who had dated Ryan before me and had a story that sounded eerily familiar. Sarah and I met at a quiet cafe in the suburbs, far from anywhere Megan might see us. She was a petite woman in her early 30s, with tired eyes and a wariness that spoke of hard lessons learned. "I know why you're here," she said as I sat down across from her. Daniel told me. You want to know about Ryan and Megan. I want to know everything, I replied. Please. Sarah's story was heartbreaking in its familiarity. She had met Ryan at a charity event, had fallen for his charm, had believed she had found her soulmate. And then, slowly, her life had started to fall apart. Friends turned against her. Colleagues stopped trusting her. Her reputation, carefully built over a decade, crumbled in a matter of months. It wasn't until after Ryan dumped me that I figured out what had happened, Sarah said, her voice bitter. Megan had been behind all of it. She was Ryan's real girlfriend, and I was just their toy. They would target women like us, vulnerable women who just wanted to be loved, and they would destroy us for fun. But why? I asked, the question that had been haunting me for months. What do they get out of it? Sarah shook her head. Power, I guess. Control. The feeling of being better than everyone else. I don't know. They're sick people, Sophie. They enjoy causing pain. Did you ever try to get justice? To expose them? I tried, Sarah admitted. But Megan had covered her tracks too well. By the time I figured out what was happening, she had already turned everyone against me. No one believed a word I said. I ended up losing my job and having to move across the country just to escape the rumors. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Don't be sorry, Sarah said, squeezing my fingers. Be smart. If you're going after them, you need to be careful. They're dangerous, Sophie. They've been doing this for years, and they're very, very good at it. I know, I said. That's why I'm not going to give them a chance to fight back. I went home that night with a new determination burning in my chest. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, building alliances, preparing for this moment. It was time to act. But first, I needed to confront Megan, not to give her a chance to explain or apologize, but to see the look on her face when she realized that her perfect plan was crumbling around her. I chose a Friday evening when Ryan would be out of town for a conference and Megan would be home alone. I made dinner, something nice, the way we used to do when we were still pretending to be friends. I opened a bottle of wine and set the table with candles and flowers. When Megan came home from work, she stopped in the doorway, her eyes widening at the scene. What's all this? She asked, suspicion evident in her voice. I thought we could have a nice dinner, I said, my voice calm. Clear the air, start fresh. Megan studied me for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out my angle, but the temptation of a free meal and the opportunity to gloat was too much for her to resist. That sounds lovely, she said finally, setting down her bag and joining me at the table. We made small talk through the appetizer, dancing around the subjects we both knew we would eventually have to address. Megan was charming as always, telling stories about work and asking polite questions about my life. But I could see the predator lurking behind her eyes, waiting for the moment when she could strike. She did not realize that this time she was the prey. Dessert arrived, and I decided it was time. I know what you did, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Megan's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What are you talking about? I know about the projects folder. I know about Anna and Jessica and Lindsay and all the others. I know about the money you stole from me. I know about Ryan and your sick little game. The mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something ugly flash in Megan's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by an expression of wounded innocence. Sophie, I don't know what you think you know, but— Don't, I interrupted, my voice hardening. Don't lie to me, not anymore. I have evidence. Screenshots, recordings, financial records. I have testimony from your other victims, and I have a very good lawyer who is very interested in pursuing charges for fraud and theft. Megan's face went pale. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed at a loss for words. You can't prove anything, she said finally, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. I can prove everything, I corrected. And I will, unless— Her eyes narrowed. Unless what? Unless you do exactly what I say. I laid out my terms. Megan would move out of the apartment immediately, forfeiting her share of the security deposit to cover some of the money she had stolen. She would repay the rest of the money in monthly installments, documented and notarized. She would cut all contact with me and with the other women she had victimized, and she would write a full confession of her actions, to be held in trust by my lawyer as insurance against future behavior. If she refused, I would go to the police with my evidence. I would file civil suits for fraud and theft. I would contact her employer and share the documentation of her illegal activities. Her career, her reputation, her entire carefully constructed life would be destroyed. Megan listened to my terms in silence, her face growing more pinched with each word. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. "You're bluffing," she said. "You don't have the guts." I pulled out my phone and showed her the folder of evidence I had compiled. Screenshots of her laptop, recordings of her incriminating statements, copies of bank records and financial documents, statements from Anna, Jessica, Lindsay, and Sarah. "Try me," I said. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could see the wheels turning in Megan's mind as she calculated her options, looking for a way out. But there was no way out. I had made sure of it. "Fine," she said at last, her voice dripping with venom. "You win. I'll do what you want. But this isn't over, Sophie. You think you're so clever, but you have no idea who you're dealing with." "Actually," I replied, standing up and gathering the plates, "I think I finally understand exactly who I'm dealing with. And that's why you're going to do what I say." Megan moved out that weekend. I watched from the window as she loaded boxes into a moving truck, her movements sharp and angry. Ryan came to help her, shooting dark looks up at my window every few minutes. I just smiled and waved. The aftermath of Megan's departure was strange. The apartment felt empty, haunted by the ghost of a friendship that had never really existed. But it also felt clean, as if a darkness had been lifted that I had not even realized was there. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I changed the locks, repainted the walls, rearranged the furniture until every trace of Megan was erased. I reached out to the friends I had neglected during our codependent years, rebuilding relationships that Megan had tried to sabotage. I focused on my career, earning recognition and promotions that I had always deserved but had been too beaten down to pursue. And I kept tabs on Megan, not out of obsession, but out of self-preservation. I needed to know if she was honoring our agreement, and I needed to be prepared if she tried to retaliate. For a while, everything was quiet. Megan made her monthly payments on time, and I heard nothing from her or Ryan. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was over. But I should have known better. Megan was not the type to accept defeat gracefully. The first sign of trouble came about 3 months after she moved out. I was at work when I received a call from my bank, asking me to verify some suspicious activity on my account. Someone had tried to transfer a large sum of money out of my savings, using login credentials that only I should have known. My heart sank. I knew immediately who was responsible. I spent the rest of the day on the phone with the bank, my IT department, and the police. It turned out that Megan had installed keylogging software on my computer before she left, capturing my passwords and giving her access to my accounts. Fortunately, the bank had caught the suspicious activity before the transfer went through, and my money was safe. But the violation stung. Even after everything, even after being caught and confronted and forced to pay for her crimes, Megan was still trying to hurt me. I contacted my lawyer and updated my evidence file. Then I sat down and wrote Megan a very carefully worded email, reminding her of the terms of our agreement and the consequences of violating them. I included screenshots of the attempted transfer and the police report I had filed. "If anything like this happens again," I wrote, "I will release everything, and I will not stop until you are behind bars." The attacks stopped after that, or at least they became too subtle for me to trace. But I knew Megan was still out there, still seething, still looking for a way to get back at me. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. It was during this period that I grew closer to Daniel. What had started as a practical alliance had evolved into a genuine friendship. He was kind and supportive, always willing to listen when I needed to vent about Megan or worry about the future. He became a fixture in my rebuilt life, a reminder that not everyone was out to hurt me. And somewhere along the way, something else started to develop. A spark, a connection, a feeling that I had been too wounded to recognize at first, but that grew stronger with each passing day. I was falling for him, and it terrified me. After everything I had been through with Ryan, the idea of opening my heart again felt impossibly risky. What if Daniel was just another Megan, another wolf in sheep's clothing waiting for the perfect moment to strike? What if I was making the same mistakes all over again? But Daniel was patient. He never pushed, never pressured, just showed up consistently and proved through his actions that he could be trusted. And slowly, hesitantly, I began to let my guard down. Our first kiss happened on a cold winter night, standing on the bridge in Lincoln Park with the city lights glittering around us. It was gentle and sweet, nothing like the passionate intensity I had felt with Ryan, but it felt real in a way that nothing with Ryan ever had. "I'm not going to hurt you," Daniel said, his forehead pressed against mine. "I know you don't have any reason to believe that, but I promise, Sophie, I will never be like them." I wanted to believe him. More than anything in the world, I wanted to believe him. Months passed, and my life continued to transform. Daniel and I started dating officially, taking things slow and building a foundation of trust that had been absent from all my previous relationships. My career flourished, and I was promoted to senior marketing director, leading a team of 12 and earning a salary that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. I heard rumors about Megan occasionally, through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances. She and Ryan had broken up, apparently in spectacular fashion. She had lost her job under mysterious circumstances. She was bouncing between apartments, unable to settle anywhere for long. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction at her downfall, but another part, a part I was not proud of, felt empty. I had spent so much time and energy on revenge, on exposing Megan and making her pay for what she had done. Now that it was over, I did not know who I was anymore. I had defined myself by my opposition to her for so long that I had forgotten who I was before she came into my life. It was my therapist who helped me see what was happening. I had started seeing Dr. Amelia Chen about 6 months after Megan moved out, needing professional help to process the trauma of what I had been through. She was calm and insightful, asking questions that made me uncomfortable, but ultimately led to breakthroughs. "You're grieving," she told me one day, during a particularly difficult session. "Not for the friendship you lost, but for the friendship you never had. You're mourning the person you thought Megan was, the relationship you thought you had. And that grief is complicated by the fact that it was all a lie." I sat with her words for a long time, turning them over in my mind. "How do I move on?" I asked finally. "How do I learn to trust again?" Dr. Chen smiled, a gentle expression that held no judgment. "One day at a time, one relationship at a time. You've already started, Sophie. You just don't see it yet." She was right. Daniel was proof that I could trust again, that not everyone was out to hurt me. My rebuilt friendships were proof that I could form genuine connections. My career was proof that I could succeed on my own terms, without someone else pulling the strings. I was healing, slowly, painfully, but surely. The confrontation I had been dreading came about a year after Megan moved out. I was at a networking event downtown, mingling with potential clients and enjoying the satisfaction of being respected in my field. And then I saw her. Megan was standing across the room, looking diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered. Her hair was shorter, her clothes less polished, but the look in her eyes when she spotted me was the same, calculating, cold, predatory. She started walking toward me, and for a moment, panic seized my chest. But then I took a deep breath and reminded myself of who I was now. I was not the same naive, trusting Sophie she had manipulated for years. I was stronger, wiser, and I had an entire support system behind me. I stood my ground as she approached. "Sophie," she said, her voice saccharine sweet. "What a surprise. I didn't expect to see you here." "Megan," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I could say the same. We stood there for a moment, two enemies sizing each other up. The people around us continued their conversations, oblivious to the tension crackling between us. "I've been thinking about you," Megan said finally, "about everything that happened, and I wanted to apologize." I raised an eyebrow, not trusting her for a second. "Apologize?" "Yes." She put her hand on my arm, a gesture that once would have felt comforting but now made my skin crawl. "I was in a bad place back then. Ryan was manipulating me, using me to get to you. I know that's not an excuse, but I want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you." The audacity of her lies was almost impressive. She was standing there, looking me in the eye, rewriting history as if I did not have a folder full of evidence proving exactly how calculated her actions had been. "I have her confession," I reminded myself. "I have everything I need." "That's an interesting version of events," I said aloud, keeping my voice calm. "But I have documentation that tells a very different story." Megan's face flickered just for a moment before the mask slammed back into place. "I don't know what you think you have, but I think we both know exactly what I have," I interrupted. "And I think we both know what will happen if you try anything like this again. So let's just agree to stay out of each other's lives, shall we?" I turned and walked away, my heart pounding but my head held high. I could feel her eyes on my back, burning with hatred and impotent rage. But I did not look back. I had won. Not just the battle, but the war. The final chapter of my story with Megan came about 2 years after that confrontation. I was living a good life by then. Daniel and I were engaged, planning a small wedding in the spring. I had started my own marketing consultancy, leaving the corporate world behind to build something of my own. I was happy, truly happy, in a way I had never been when Megan was in my life. And then I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from Sarah, the woman who had been one of Megan's earlier victims. She sounded excited, breathless. "Sophie, you need to see this. Check your email. I'm sending you a link." I pulled up my inbox and clicked on the link she had sent. It led to a news article from a local paper in a suburb of Chicago. The headline read, "Local woman arrested for fraud and embezzlement." And there was Megan's mugshot, staring out at me from the screen. According to the article, Megan had been working as an office manager for a small medical practice. Over the course of 2 years, she had embezzled over $300,000 from the practice, using a complex system of fake invoices and altered records. She had been caught when the practice owner noticed discrepancies in the books and hired an auditor to investigate. The evidence was overwhelming. Megan was facing multiple felony charges, with a possible sentence of up to 20 years in prison. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. I felt a lot of things in that moment. Relief that she was finally facing real consequences for her actions. Vindication that I had been right about who she really was. Sadness for all the people she had hurt along the way. But mostly, I felt free. Megan was not my problem anymore. She was not anyone's problem anymore. The system I had never quite trusted to deliver justice had finally caught up with her, and she was going to pay for her crimes in a way that my revenge never could have achieved. I called Daniel and told him the news. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "I feel like it's finally over," I said, "like I can finally let go." And I could. I did. Megan pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 4. I did not attend the sentencing. I did not need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. Instead, I focused on building my future. I married Daniel in a beautiful ceremony, surrounded by friends and family who truly cared about me. I grew my business into a successful consultancy that allowed me to set my own hours and work on projects I was passionate about. I became a mentor to young women entering the marketing field, passing on the lessons I had learned about trusting your instincts and recognizing manipulation. And I reconnected with the other women Megan had victimized: Anna, Jessica, Lindsay, Sarah, and others I had discovered along the way. We formed a kind of informal support group, meeting occasionally for dinner or drinks, sharing our stories and our healing journeys. We were all at different stages of recovery, but we were all moving forward. One evening, about a year after Megan's conviction, I found myself at one of these gatherings. We were at a nice restaurant in Lincoln Park, the same neighborhood where my nightmare had begun and ended. The conversation was flowing freely, laughter mingling with more serious discussions. At some point, Anna raised her glass and proposed a toast. "To Sophie," she said, "for having the courage to do what the rest of us couldn't, for exposing Megan and making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else." I felt my cheeks flush as everyone raised their glasses. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "We all contributed. We all survived." "But you were the one who fought back," Sarah added. "You were the one who refused to let her win." I thought about her words later that night, lying in bed next to my sleeping husband. Was that what I had done? Fought back? Refused to let her win? Maybe. But I had done something else too, something that I was only beginning to understand. I had taken back my story. For years, Megan had controlled the narrative of my life, casting me as the vulnerable victim, the easy target, the fool who could be manipulated and discarded at will. But I had refused to accept that role. I had rewritten the story, cast myself as the hero, and created an ending that I could be proud of. It had not been easy. There were times when I wanted to give up, when the weight of the betrayal felt too heavy to carry. There were times when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was just as bad as Megan for wanting revenge. But I had persevered. I had gathered my evidence, built my alliances, and waited for the right moment to strike. And when that moment came, I had been ready. Not because I wanted to hurt Megan, though I would be lying if I said that was not part of it, but because I wanted to protect others from experiencing what I had experienced. I wanted to make sure that Megan could never do to anyone else what she had done to me. And I had succeeded. I am not the same person I was when this story began. That naive, trusting girl from Ohio feels like a distant memory, a stranger I used to know. In her place is someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who knows that the world is not always kind, but who has not let that knowledge make her bitter. I still believe in friendship. I still believe in love. I still believe that trust, when earned, is one of the most precious gifts we can give each other. But I also believe in myself now, in a way I never did before. I trust my instincts, my judgment, my ability to recognize danger and respond to it. I am not afraid to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, to walk away from people who do not treat me with respect. Megan tried to destroy me. She came close to succeeding. But in the end, she gave me something I never could have found on my own, the strength that comes from surviving the worst and coming out the other side. I think about her sometimes, locked away in her prison cell. I wonder if she ever thinks about me, if she ever regrets what she did, if she ever understands the magnitude of the pain she caused. Probably not. People like Megan rarely reflect on their actions. They are too busy blaming others, too focused on their own victimhood to recognize the damage they have done. But it does not matter anymore. Megan is part of my past, a chapter that has been written and closed. I have moved on to new chapters, new adventures, new joys that she can never touch. I have a husband who loves me. I have a business that challenges and fulfills me. I have friendships that are genuine and deep and built on mutual respect. I have a life that I am proud of, a life that I have built with my own 2 hands. And I have peace. Not the naive peace of someone who has never known pain, but the hard-won peace of someone who has looked into the abyss and chosen to walk away. Megan Cross was my roommate. She became my enemy. And now she is nothing to me at all. This is my story. The story of how I was betrayed by the person I trusted most in the world, and how I rose from the ashes of that betrayal to build a life worth living. It is a story of pain and anger and the long, slow process of healing, but it is also a story of strength, of resilience, of the incredible power we all have to rewrite our own narratives. If you are going through something similar, if you have been betrayed by someone you love and are struggling to find your way forward, I want you to know that there is hope. You are not alone. You are not weak, and you are not defined by what was done to you. You are the author of your own story, and you have the power to give it a different ending. I know because I did it myself. My name is Sophie, and this is the story of how my roommate turned into my enemy. It is also the story of how I turned that enemy into nothing more than a memory, and that, I think, is the best revenge of all. The night before Megan's sentencing, I had a dream. In it, I was back in our old apartment, the one in Lincoln Park with the exposed brick and the city view. Megan was there too, sitting on the couch where I had found her with Ryan all those years ago. But in the dream, she looked different, smaller somehow, less intimidating. The predatory gleam in her eyes was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. "Why did you have to ruin everything?" she asked me in the dream. "We could have been friends forever." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw the insecurity that had always lurked beneath her confidence, the jealousy that had driven her to tear down everyone around her, the emptiness that no amount of manipulation or control could ever fill. "We were never friends," I told her gently. "You never wanted a friend. You wanted a victim." And then I walked out the door and did not look back. I woke up from that dream with tears streaming down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of release, of finally letting go of the anger and hurt that I had carried for so long. Megan had taken so much from me, but she had not taken everything. She had not taken my capacity for love, for joy, for hope. She had not taken my ability to trust, though she had certainly tested it. She had not taken my future. And as I lay there in the early morning light, my husband's arm draped over my waist, I realized that she had never been capable of taking those things. They had always been mine, and they always would be. The rest of the story, my story, was still being written. There would be challenges ahead, heartbreaks and setbacks and moments of doubt. But there would also be triumphs, celebrations, ordinary days full of small joys that added up to a life well lived. And through all of it, I would carry the lessons I had learned from my time with Megan. Trust your instincts, protect your boundaries, and never, ever let someone else define your worth. 3 years after Megan's conviction, I was asked to speak at a conference for survivors of narcissistic abuse. I was nervous, standing backstage with my notes clutched in my sweaty hands. Public speaking had never been my strong suit, and the thought of sharing my story with a room full of strangers was terrifying. But then I thought about all the people like me who were still in the middle of their own battles, the ones who were being gaslit into doubting their own perceptions, the ones who were being isolated from friends and family by skilled manipulators, the ones who were on the verge of losing everything and did not even know it yet. I walked onto that stage and told my story. All of it, from the first moment Megan sat down across from me in that college dining hall to the final confrontation at the networking event. I talked about the betrayal, the financial exploitation, the calculated destruction of my self-esteem, but I also talked about the recovery, the rebuilding, the hard-won peace that came from refusing to be a victim. When I finished, the room was silent, and then, slowly, people started to stand. The applause washed over me like a wave, and I felt something shift inside my chest. I had taken my pain and turned it into purpose. I had taken my story and used it to help others. And in that moment, standing on that stage with tears streaming down my face, I finally understood what my therapist had meant all those years ago. I was not just surviving anymore, I was thriving. After the conference, a young woman approached me. She could not have been more than 22, with wide eyes and a nervous energy that reminded me of myself at that age. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm in a situation right now, with my roommate. She's my best friend, or I thought she was. But lately things have been getting weird, and I didn't know if I was crazy or if something was really wrong." "You're not crazy," I told her firmly. "Trust your instincts. They're trying to tell you something." "But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid?" I took her hand and looked her straight in the eye. "Even if you are wrong, even if there's a perfectly innocent explanation for everything, you have nothing to lose by being careful. Pay attention to the patterns. Document anything that seems off. And most importantly, don't let anyone make you doubt your own perceptions." She nodded, some of the fear fading from her eyes. "Thank you. I think I needed to hear that." "I know you did," I said, "because I needed someone to tell me the same thing, and no one did." I watched her walk away, hoping that she would be okay, hoping that my words would help her avoid the years of pain that I had endured. And I made a promise to myself, right there in that conference hall. I would keep telling my story. I would keep reaching out to people who needed to hear it. I would keep fighting against the Megans of the world, not with anger or revenge, but with truth and compassion, and the hard-won wisdom of someone who had been through the fire and come out the other side. Because that was the real victory. Not Megan's conviction, not the money she was forced to repay, not even the satisfaction of seeing her face in that mugshot. The real victory was this: I had turned my pain into something meaningful. I had taken the worst experience of my life and used it to help others. I had refused to let Megan define me, and in doing so, I had discovered who I really was. I was Sophie Hartwell, survivor, advocate, fighter, and I was just getting started. As I write this, it has been 5 years since Megan moved out of our apartment. 5 years since I confronted her and took back control of my life. 5 years since I made the decision to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. Megan was released from prison last month after serving 4 years of her 7-year sentence. I heard about it through the grapevine from one of the other women she had victimized. For a moment, the old fear flared up, the worry that she would come after me again. But then it passed, because I am not the same person I was 5 years ago. And I have built a life that Megan can never touch. She is out there somewhere, starting over with a felony record and a ruined reputation. I do not wish her ill, but I do not wish her well either. She is simply irrelevant to me now. A footnote in the story of my life, not the main character she once tried to be. My life, meanwhile, is full of good things. My business is thriving. My marriage is strong. I have friends who know the real me and love me anyway. I have purpose and meaning and a future that I am excited about. I have everything Megan tried to take from me, and more. Some nights, when I am feeling reflective, I think about the girl I used to be. The one who sat alone in that college dining hall, desperate for connection, willing to believe the best in anyone who showed her kindness. I think about her naivety, her trust, her vulnerability, and I want to reach back through time and warn her. Tell her to be careful, to protect herself, to not give her heart so freely to someone who would only break it. But I cannot do that. I cannot change the past. What I can do is honor her courage in surviving what came next, honor her strength in refusing to be destroyed, honor her resilience in building a new life from the ashes of the old. She was naive, yes, but she was also brave, and in the end, that bravery was what saved her. My name is Sophie. I was betrayed by my best friend, the person I trusted most in the world. She stole from me, lied to me, tried to destroy everything I had built, but she did not succeed, because I fought back, because I refused to be a victim, because I took the worst experience of my life and turned it into the foundation for something better. This is my story, the story of how my roommate turned into my enemy, and the story of how I won. If you are reading this and you are in a situation like I was, I want you to know that there is hope. It may not feel like it now, but you have more strength than you know. You have the power to rewrite your own story. You have the ability to take back control of your life. It will not be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, when the weight of the betrayal feels too heavy to carry. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when you wonder if you are the problem. You are not the problem. They are. Trust yourself, protect yourself, and do not be afraid to fight back, because you deserve better. You deserve honesty and loyalty and love that does not come with conditions. You deserve friends who build you up instead of tearing you down. You deserve a life that is truly yours, not one that has been shaped and controlled by someone else's agenda. You deserve to be the hero of your own story, and you can be. I know, because I am. This is the end of my story with Megan, but it is just the beginning of the rest of my life, and I intend to live it well.